Hi, everybody. Hello.
Hey everyone, good evening. Hope that you're all well today.
There we go.
Thanks for tuning in to our stress or anti-stress
Anti-stress
webinar tonight. Hello, everybody.
Okay, brilliant. Just let me just confirm that everyone can hear us clearly. Can we just get a shout out just on the chat, and just let's make sure someone can just wave hands or do something that says, hey, we can hear you guys clearly. Yay,
Okay,
all clear.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, welcome everyone. I know that there are quite a few there's some people that raise their hands. Please don't raise your hand. It's not one of those.
Really good question.
It's one of those. So let's kick off by just telling you guys some housekeeping rules associated with the webinars that we do. It's not really housekeeping rules. It's just setting the context for how we do these things. Some of you may have joined for the first time. We saw quite a few people sign up that haven't done these webinars before. And the way we do them is quite informal. We used to do them very formal with plants and props and cameras and lights. And a set and like cutaways and things like that. And people went like, yeah, it's nice and all that, but it's not what we know you to be all about, or what we know Lisa to be all about. They want the authentic aspect of it. And it's kind of what we had during lockdown when we started this.
Join us in our home.
Join us in our home.
In the next door room.
Exactly. And we're back.
Just kick back in and we're like, please. Same challenges that everybody has at home. Kids might come running past, etc., etc. So I just wanted it to be authentically us, and just to be able to be free to speak and guide and help and serve the best that we know how.
Yeah. So look, it's about being informal. It's about just, I know Alan's joined us. He's a special guest with us this evening. I'll introduce him in a second. But he's probably thinking, whoa, this is quite informal for a setting like this. Yes, we love to keep it informal. We want to keep it authentic. This is in our home. We're bringing special guests. It's pro bono, so none of you are paid to be here. But this entire webinar series that we're doing right now is brought to all of us and is made possible by Biogen. So just a nice shout out to the guys over at Biogen. Thank you for that. And we'll kind of give them a mention here and there throughout the webinar. So really pleased that they came along for the ride to make this all possible. So today's topic is quite interesting. Now, before we jump into it, though, I just want to tell everyone the chat is going to be quite active. Some of you love to go in there and chat. So as people ask questions, as people are presenting, I'll try and reply. I'll be logged in as me, and I know Kara's logged in too, and we'll try and answer as best as we possibly can.
And also, if you need to make comments private, then you can just make sure that you're only asking host, and that way we'll see it, and then we will actually say what the question is, but we won't mention who it's from. So if you want to do an anonymous kind of like little question, it's also totally fine.
Okay, so the topic tonight is stress. And
are you listening? I hope you are listening.
I hope you're listening too.
Just checking.
And it's we laugh about it, but it is something that I think we've spoken about this before. We've done a webinar on stress before, but we're doing another one.
Resilience, anxiety. We've touched on these things before, but it's a good reminder. Also, lots of new people joining our family, our community. So it's also good to remind our current clients of some of the things that they maybe learned a year ago and they've forgotten, or they just, slowly you fall out of habits. And then before you know it, you look back and go, what happened? And it wasn't anything that you did dramatically. You didn't decide today, I'm not exercising anymore. I'm not eating well anymore. I'm not doing any more gratitude. I'm not doing any of these things. And that's it. It's things that you kind of slip. This thing slips, and then that thing slips, and then before you know it, it's been a very long time since you did all the things that gave you joy or that helped you to have a better perception, reduce stress levels, made you sleep better, and things are sliding one way. And I also know winter has been really cold. In Joburg, it feels like it's been darker and colder than any other year I've lived in Joburg. And I know I've had certain sort of health challenges along the way. I was quite sick a few weeks ago. In fact, last week I was on an antibiotic. I finished on Sunday. Chilblains in my hands. I've had crazy nosebleeds. I haven't even spoken about it yet. But, it's just been a really intense winter. And winter's not an easy time of year for a lot of people. Not enough sunshine. It's not always easy to get out. Maybe your workout regime has slipped a bit. The eating side of things, too many pizzas, too many pastas, too many comfort foods. And are you, the weather's changing, and it's changing quite quickly. And all of a sudden now you're like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready for summer. And also, so not only that, but I'm also feeling really burnt out. And we're only mid-August, still have 4.5 months to go until the end of the year, until I can take my foot off the pedal and enjoy a well-deserved holiday. I don't think I'm going to make it. I don't think I'm going to make it to December. I'm feeling like I'm about to have a nervous breakdown or about to, suffer from major burnouts. And so, we just want to impart some tips and tools, and also introduce you to a guest to kind of expose. There's a beautiful new app. Is it an app? Would you call it an app or a platform?
What platform?
Panda,
it's an app. It's an app. It's a platform. Yeah, Alan can give us. He's a co-founder.
Space. Yeah. So where you can go for help and guidance and assistance on the sort of mental health and stress and anxiety path, which is absolutely fantastic. And then Carly's going to talk to you quite a lot about the nutrition side of things. So, food and vitamins and supplements, and how we can also address what happens when we get really stressed, and from hormonally to what do we reach for, why do we do that, to what should we reach for, what do our bodies need when we're under periods of stress. And then at the end, I'll share a couple of my coping mechanisms that I have found quite helpful in my life. People often say to me, you used to be so stressed. Oh my gosh, you're so busy. How do you do it all? And I have got my tactics, things that really help me to cope with being stressed/busy. So yeah, just personal antics that I'd love to
share.
Kind of share. Yeah.
Okay, and just lastly on the housekeeping side of things, it's just to say that this little webinar, we normally get hundreds of people to sign up, and at the moment I think we're 106, 107 as it climbs. People will drop off and come back and forth on because of load shedding, but generally the RSVPs that we get are in the hundreds of people coming, and we make this available for free as a download right after this. So what I will do is I'll capture this as a little video, we'll edit it a little bit, and then we'll send you a link to download it. Please feel free to share it with friends and family, and it will also go up on our e-store. So I think it's like $10 to get it, 10 Rand, that we put it up there. So the objective here with these webinars is not monetization. There's no monetary gain, for lack of, in fact, those of you that have been loyal and been with us for a while, you've noticed that we do a whole lot less specials, or just wait 15 minutes and we're gonna announce the special, and we're not doing that anymore. We actually felt like that was kind of ambulance chasing, because we are dealing with very serious subjects. I mean, stress is not a joke. Stress, as Alan I'm sure will allude to, can lead to quite dark paths. So it just didn't feel right to kind of blend in hey, go get a rebounder for 20% off, or go get this off. No, we're not doing that. So here, literally, it is just to impart this knowledge, have special guests, experts that can share these things with you. And it's done really from Lisa's heart. I mean, she really wanted these things to happen.
It's really an empowerment platform.
Yeah, it's empowerment for me.
The better my clients do overall and holistically, the better, because there's no point just jumping on a rebounder or just randomly doing your DNA, but then actually not making all the other necessary lifestyle changes, attitude, looking at digestion, looking at sleep, looking at growth, looking at relationships, looking at joy, looking at all those things. There's no point just isolating one thing from the next and thinking that just going to classes every week is going to make one happy and healthy. It's a very linear way of looking at things, and a human being is multi-phrenic, super complex. And there's a lot of moving parts at all times that all need attention, that all need to be addressed at some point, and the order in which you do them will definitely depend on you and like the low-hanging fruit. Sometimes it's easier to address something that for you it would be easier, so that you can see some wins, because then you feel quite motivated to keep going, because there's an instant result in a way, and then you go to the next lowest hanging fruit, and so it begins. And it's a beautiful cycle. So the healthier you are, the healthier you feel, the more powerful you feel, the more things you attract into your life, the more positive you become. And it's quite addictive, that positivity, that feeling of being well and happy and healthy and energized and full of vitality becomes quite an addiction, but a healthier addiction. Yes. So yes.
Just last one before I introduce Alan is I want to encourage you all to go take a look at our podcast. The podcast, as Being You, is what it's called. It's on all the platforms. If you're on Apple, if you're on Spotify, all the various MP3 or audio players, you'll find Being You there. And just some interesting stats. The podcasting institution that partners with us to deliver this for you. We just want to thank you all for listening in, those that have listened in, because the statistics are jaw-dropping even for them. I mean, these podcasts are not
they're long. I'm sorry, guys. I can talk a lot, and I wanted to really, and when we talk about a subject, I really want it to be thorough. I wasn't lying when I said in the first one, the intro podcast, like episode, I feel like I never get an opportunity to complete my thoughts because everything is always so time sensitive and no one has time, and I have to consolidate everything into a 15-minute radio interview or a 1,000-word article, or, you know, a quick 4-minute TV interview or a 90-second reel. And that is really frustrating because when we're talking about subjects like we talk about, you need time. And so it might take you 2 or 3, you know, listening sessions to get through it. And I'm not going to apologize for the length of them because it comes, there's very little preparation that goes into it. And when we're done, we're done.
You do a lot of prep, but I think you should speak from the heart. But the second episode is on cultivating joy. And I think it goes in unison with this stress-related topic, is how do you cultivate joy? And I must be honest, I found it very fascinating. It's 2 hours long. Enjoy. And we found out, especially episode 2, I mean, we've had hundreds of people have actually started listening and all the way through, and it's incredible that people are actually consuming that.
Guys, it's one movie. Instead of watching one Netflix movie or Iron Man 3, which the kids are watching, 3 hours, you can listen to, you know, something that could possibly change the way you see something.
Okay, cool. Let's switch over to Alan. Alan, welcome. Alan Sweden, I just want to make a special announcement. I mean, if you go to our website now, you go to lisaraleigh.com, you look under partners, you'll see Discovery, Momentum, you know, etc. But one of the partners now officially between the two organizations is Panda. So when you click on that, you'll get a description of what Panda is. And Panda is an interesting organization co-founded by Alon and Alan. And Alon I know very well from his Uber days. I used to be ahead of a couple of multinational companies in my time. So I think when I was head of Google, just shortly thereafter, a couple of years thereafter, he was head of Uber, and we used to get together a lot. And I've innovated with Uber with some of my technology investments. And it was just very interesting to notice that Alan got off the technology train and he got kind of into the wholeness train. And when he and I got together and we had a chat about it, it was so congruent what I felt we were doing, what he was doing, and then he kind of felt what I was doing with Lisa. It was fascinating because this technology background, kind of this business background, and we're getting into like health and wellness. Why? And I think it's the pandemic. The pandemic really switched us all on to health and wellness and how important it is, because so much death we were seeing and feeling around us. And it's very interesting, his story. So I am going to get him on our podcast to speak about his journey. It's very similar. And he and I will go back and forth. And it's kind of two geeks, two businessmen with business backgrounds talking about finding ourselves, like he's found himself into this mental wellness thing. So he's built this application. It's called Panda. Go take a look at it on our website. We encourage all our clients.
Panda, I wouldn't know. Why the word Panda? Why did you call it Panda?
Yeah. And also, Alan, just kind of from a wellness perspective, you know, the reason we were so happy about partnering with Panda was it kind of closes the circle. You know, we talk about what you do with your body from an exercise, fitness, and rebounding perspective. And then we have another brand. It's kind of what you put on your body, which is all the athleisure, and that's affirmation, makes you feel good, makes you look good. And then the third brand is kind of what you put in your body, which is LR, and that's where like Carly fits in. It's DNA, it's nutrition, it's dietetics, you know, lifestyle. But the thing that we didn't close was the mental health side, and that's where we felt like we were touching all those things, but one element that was missing in the whole wheel was mental health. And I'm so excited that Panda's come along now to partner with us. And we want to encourage everyone, go get the app, take a look at it. And it's a beautiful story around it. I'm sure Alan's going to go into it. But Alan's objective being on this call, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I've taken up a lot of time. He's got a psychology background. He's been an entrepreneur in the kind of in the space, in the patient space, and he can give some more insights in there. But you know, that closing of the circle from a mental health perspective is critical and crucial for us. And I think what Panda does is beautiful because it gives you this opportunity via an app to identify, do I have a mental illness? And then it actually takes you down a path of identifying more or less what it is. And then there's actually support on that app, which is incredible. So we want to encourage all our clients, and we're going to keep putting the word out about Panda moving forward because we think what you guys are doing is incredible. And yeah, over to you, Alan. So I'm going to leave it at that. You can unmute yourself. I'm going to spotlight you so everyone can kind of see you. You are a host.
Great.
Okay, great.
Good. Thank you. And you can hear me?
Yes, clearly.
Okay, good. I always found it weird to see myself on the screen, so I'm going to just minimize this for a moment, and I'm going to speak to a blank screen. But first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. Alon does send his apologies. He really did want to be here this evening, but he had family commitments. But he always speaks so highly of you guys, and I was very happy to fill in. So just to send his apologies and to say thank you so much. And it's great to see so many people on this webinar. Tomorrow I've been invited to do something called a vodcast. I'm not sure what that is, but this I'm hoping that it's like this, because this feels informal and it feels useful, and I'm really happy to be here. So what I'll do is let me just introduce myself very quickly and then talk a little bit about why Panda, and then I'll speak very kind of briefly about stress, about the topic for this evening, and then I really would like it to be quite engaging as opposed to me giving some kind of lecture. So let me carry on. So my name is Alan Swaden. I am a clinical psychologist. I could tell you when I qualified, but that would give away my age, but it was a very long time ago. And I was in private practice for about 14 years before I got the opportunity to set up a small unit inside of what was Joburg's actually second, but really kind of biggest psychiatric hospital at the time, which was called Crescent Clinic. And I got offered the opportunity to set up a dual diagnosis treatment group inside of this hospital. And really what dual diagnosis meant was that it was patients who had an addictive disorder, but they also suffered from some kind of mental illness like depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or a personality disorder, etc. And I really loved the business of psychology. I came into psychology for personal reasons. There was quite a lot of mental health issues in my family. And suddenly I had this opportunity to help, more people than I was able to kind of reach within my private practice, which was about 8 people a day. And then suddenly I was treating about sort of, let's say 30 people a day. And that grew over the years. We ended up building 7 hospitals and buying 5 hospitals. Eventually, we had 892 beds across 13 hospitals across South Africa. And we were treating about 22,000 patients a year in what became the Akeso or Akiso group of hospitals. We had about 214 psychiatrists working with us, about 400 psychologists. So it became this really, huge organization that I feel really did really good work because it gave people a place to sort of be caught if they were in some kind of spiral. And it gave us an opportunity to catch those people and to understand what it was that really needed the most amount of attention in terms of their biology, their psychology, and their social network, and make the appropriate changes to them in that biopsychosocial sphere, and then send them back on their way, hopefully having changed the direction of their trajectory. I really enjoyed that, and we sold the business to Netcare in 2018. And I'm much more of an entrepreneur and much less of a corporate person. And I was very pleased to meet up with Alon Litz in 2019. And in 2020, we decided that we were going to do something together. And what we were going to do was address this massive problem of the unmet need for mental health. And really what I mean by that is, if you just look at any population, and this goes to almost any population around the world at any time, about 15% of any population will need some kind of help for their mental health during any calendar year. And in South Africa, if we have about 60 million people, then that equates to about 9 million people a year needing some kind of intervention for their mental health problems. And during COVID, that became an even bigger problem. And about 80%, if you can believe that, of people in South Africa who need some kind of mental health care don't get any. So if we're talking about 9 million people needing mental health help, about 6 million people don't get any help at all. And the reason for that is that it's a very difficult system to navigate. If you need mental health assistance, people don't really know where to start. There's no triage process like there is if you fall on while you're running and you really hurt your ankle and someone takes you off to the local hospital. You'll see a nurse. The nurse will assess what kind of damage it is. If the nurse feels that you can just be bandaged and go home, that's great. And if the nurse feels that there's something more sinister, they might call in a doctor. The doctor would then look at you and then decide whether you needed x-rays or medication. If you need x-rays, then they'd call in an orthopedic surgeon, and they'd get. But there's a real process to follow. Whereas in mental health, it just isn't that, because people just don't know how to access the system at the right place or at the right time. And so what people end up doing is looking for a psychologist or a psychiatrist. There are very few psychiatrists in this country. There's about 400 psychiatrists to treat 60 million people. It's just, there's just not enough psychiatrists. There are more psychologists, but psychologists are very busy. But the truth is both of those professions are very expensive. And it's a pity to have to wait that long in order to get care. And so what Alon and I came up with was this app called Panda, and I'll get into that in a second why it's called Panda, which really helps people to enter into the mental health care system in a very non-threatening way, with a very light touch, where you don't have to pay anything. It's a free app, and you can go in there and you can download content and you can listen to our sessions in what we call the forest, which go on for 14 hours a day, 365 days a year. And there you'll find all kinds of topics about stress, about anxiety, about depression, about parenting, about breastfeeding, about all kinds of things that can either cause us stress or have caused us stress. You can also do assessments in the app. So you can do a depression assessment, an anxiety assessment, all the way through to social media assessments to see if that's a problem. And you can get feedback in real time as to how you should enter the system. Will help you to find the right person at the right time. And that's really what Panda is about. The reason it's called Panda is because when I was training to become a psychologist, I read a book by John Irving called Setting Free the Bears. And the book is about these two students who travel through Prague in the heart of summer in about 1967. And they come across the zoo, the Prague Zoo, and they see these polar bears. And these polar bears are sweltering in this heat. And they come up with this really kind of elaborate plan to set free the bears. And I won't spoil it in case anybody wants to actually read the book. But I loved the idea when I was a therapist, when I was practicing therapy more actively, of setting free the bears that are inside us. And Panda has got, pandas, they're playful, they're cuddly. Everybody loves Panda. They have the yin and they have the yang. And so they had such positive associations. So it was because of the positive associations and because of this idea that I feel like we've all got this kind of, playful, powerful bear inside us that we came up with the name of Panda. I just wonder if I should stop there and just pause, or whether you want me to go into stress and how we think about stress with Panda.
That was a great intro, Alan. I think get into stress. Give us the deep dive on that.
So I think that, when we talk about stress, I can just tell you the way that I generally think about mental health generally. I personally don't find diagnoses like depression or anxiety or a mood disorder or a personality disorder. I actually really don't find those things so useful, because they have kind of a clinical flavor to them. They have kind of a labeling flavor to them. And I think that people don't like to necessarily think of themselves as being anxious or being depressed or having bipolar disorder or a personality disorder. So what I started to think about really, and it's not my idea, it's just something that I latched onto, that I read, is that really what mental health is all about is about your risk profile, your functionality profile, and your distress profile. If we talk about mental health illnesses as opposed to mental wellness. And if you think about it like that, then the risk profiles, regardless of your diagnosis, your risk profile is really measured by your need for self-harm or your suicidality, the amount of alcohol or drugs that you use, whether or not you are psychotic. Those are really the major risk profiles that we talk about. And those are the people that need to be hospitalized. And then if we talk about functionality, it's really about the activities of daily living. Can you look after yourself? Can you wash yourself? Can you dress yourself? Can you work? Can you drive a car? How functional are you? Can you have relationships, all the way through to can you have meaning? And we can talk about functionality across this real continuum. And people who are very low in functionality also sometimes need to be hospitalized, but they do need much more care than people who are high up in functionality. And then you get this really interesting group of people who show no real risk and who are quite functional, but have very high levels of internal distress. And those people are often, I think, people that we think of as being very stressed within society, because they are, on the face of it, they're pretty functional. They're not necessarily addicted to anything. maybe exercise sometimes. And they're not necessarily, I can see you two exchanging looks there. And they're not necessarily low-end functionality or doing anything that's very risky, but they have these very high levels of internal distress. And when I thought about this topic for this evening, I thought that would be something to really kind of focus on, is what does stress do for us? What is good stress versus bad stress? And what are the things that we can do immediately to kind of help us to manage that kind of level of stress? So again, I'm going to pause, otherwise I can just ramble on, but just tell me, I'm all good. Okay, let me just carry on then. So one of the things that I've sort of become very sort of interested in the last few years, having had quite significant health issues myself, is a book written by an author called Peter Attia, and the book is called Outlive. And what Peter Attia writes about is there's two like really useful concepts in the book that I loved. The one is this idea of what he calls the centenary decathlon, and the other one is this idea of medicine 3.0. And when we think about the centenary decathlon, what he asks all of us to do, he's a GP who really specializes in wellness. What he asks all of us to do is to imagine ourselves at the age of 100 and to think to ourselves, what are the 10 things that we really want to be able to do when we're 100? And those can be things like, I still want to be able to have sex. I still want to be able to walk 5 kilometers. I still want to be able to travel. I want to be able to take the stairs instead of the escalator. I want to live independently. I want to be able to stand and cook. Whatever those things are that we imagine we still want to be able to do when we're 100, we have to plan now. So I'm 53. So if I want to be able to run 5 kilometers when I'm 100, let's say in 45 minutes, then right now what I have to do is I have to be able to run 5 kilometers in 30 minutes, because age is going to take its toll on me naturally. So if I carry on doing that, I'll slowly decrease in my capacity as I age, just naturally, but I'll stay fit enough to be able to run 5 kilometers in 45 minutes when I turn 100. And he's got all these beautiful concepts about how we need to take care of ourselves in order to miss out on what he calls the marginal decade. And the marginal decade is really related to medicine 2.0. So if you think about medicine 1.0 as kind of using leeches to blood suck when someone's got a disease, like really kind of middle-aged medicine. And then you've got to talk about medicine 2.0, which is where we all are at the moment, most of us are, which is a very reactionary way of dealing with our health. So when we get, God forbid, cancer, we go and get assistance. When we get ill, we go and see the doctor. And what that does is it allows us to live longer. So we're all living much longer, but what he talks about is this marginal decade, which is the age, let's say in South Africa, between 75 and 85, where you're alive, but you have no real quality of life. And what he talks about, what he challenges us all to do in this book, Outlive, is instead of that kind of, gradual 10-year decline, is to live your best life and then suddenly decline. But really to live your best life as long as you possibly can. And he talks about that as medicine 3.0. And what we're doing with Panda, let me leave Panda out for a minute. What's stress? If we think about stress in a physical kind of way, we all love stress. We love to put our bodies under some kind of stress, whether it be running, whether it be jumping, bouncing, whether it be whatever it is that we love to do when we break out in a sweat and we're measuring our heart rate and we're trying to get into those zones that we want to get into, we're putting our body under stress. And we all know that that makes us ultimately feel good and it builds up our resilience. And so stress, in a way, is actually really good for us. The problem becomes when we overstress ourselves or we don't take time out to replenish. And if you think about physical health, as which we can all relate to quite quickly and quite easily, if we use that analogy for our mental health, it's very similar. Some anxiety is good for us. Some grieving or loss or going through that process, which we might call depression, is good for us. The capacity to feel sadness is good for us. The capacity to feel all kinds of emotions, which I think is really what love is all about, is about finding a relationship that allows you to experience all of the emotions, not just the positive emotions. So feeling all those emotions, some of which are negative, are actually really good for us, but they do make us feel quite stressed. But if you're in a balanced relationship or you're in a balanced job or you have a balanced kind of life, then that stress is good and it drives us forward because we also have time out to replenish ourselves. But when we're in a moment where we're working really hard, we're pushing into that red zone all of the time, we're not getting the kind of feedback from our environment. If we're entrepreneurs, then it might be measured in sort of revenue or sustainability. If we work in the job, then it might be the recognition that you feel that you deserve, or the pay rise that you feel like you deserve. If you're not getting those things that replenish those things for which you're putting in that much stress, you're then going to get this thing called burnout. And that is where you kind of cross over that boundary and you move into a place that's pretty stressful. And with Panda, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to become the mental health version of medicine 3.0. What we're saying is, instead of waiting until you're in a crisis to go and ask somebody, do I need a psychologist? Do I need a psychiatrist? Do I need to be hospitalized? Do I need medication? Whatever it is, we're saying exercise your mental health and your mental wellness all the time. Do that by joining our app, going into the sessions that you find useful, downloading our content, do the coaching programs that you can do the assessments, understand where you're at, measure yourself at different points in time, and really measure yourself, your mental health, the way you'd measure cholesterol, or the way you'd measure your fitness levels or your weight or anything else like that. But keep on top of yourself as much as you possibly can. And the last thing I'll say, and then I really will open it up for questions, is this incredible link between exercise and mental health overall, and how important it is for us to have this outlet where we can take all the things that we're feeling inside us that are worrying us, or that are just sort of making us feel kind of distressed, and being able to have a proper outlet through our bodies, which is just the most beautiful thing most of the time, where not only can you release some of that kind of those poisons, but through sweating it out, but also what you do is you get into these zones, these mental health, these mental zones where you actually stop thinking and your body takes over, and you go into that beautiful kind of alpha state where you really are having a break, whether it's almost the same as meditation, where you really give your brain an opportunity to feel refreshed and replenished. And all of us who know that, like, if we're feeling really stressed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we can go and have a beer, or we can have a nap, or we can go for a walk or an exercise. I know for me, I feel endlessly better if I go for a walk and I get some exercise, as opposed to if I have a drink or I have a nap. Although I'm not saying naps are bad, and I do have them from time to time. But we all have that experience of feeling so much better after exercising.
So Alan,
I second that.
Yeah, 100% from exercise. So Alan, just from your point of view, I don't know how much you're practicing at the moment, but since pandemic, and it feels like the pandemic has really, we went in there, and Lisa posted this the other day, and she said, I miss lockdown. And essentially, because lockdown minimized the stress levels from a certain perspective. Now, obviously, that's speaking from a point of privilege, because some people hated lockdown, and the environment that they found themselves. It
does also depend where you are in your life. We weren't 20 years old wanting to go to nightclubs. We were enjoying having the family around more. So it does depend the stage of life you're in.
But the question is, we went from this like 2 years of being not distracted, having less to do, kind of focused, even though from a work perspective, there was a but then the pendulum swung from this calm lockdown state to this complete, utter freneticism, right, of normal, so-called normal life, where you're back in the traffic, you're back taking the kids to school every day.
But also being asked to work from home in between, which causes its own stress itself. So there's like this hybrid way of working. So now there's not work at work and home is play and home. It's now work is home also. And you know what I mean? So now you've got work is work, but also home is also work. So it's like, there's no line anymore.
So just the question is, from your observation, is this correct? It feels like everyone is a lot more angry, a lot more stressed now than ever before. It's almost like the pendulum went from that all the way through to this ultra stressed society that we have now. What's your thoughts on
that? I kind of hope that I think we're still traumatized, in truth, by what happened to all of us during COVID. I completely get missing lockdown, because because as an adult with some privilege, I was able to go to sleep at 9 o'clock at night without feeling like I'm missing out. I didn't have to go and fetch my teenage kids at all hours of the morning. I discovered parts of my house that I never even thought about spending time in. There was some really, I mean, after the initial kind of shock of, oh my God, I could sneeze and kill granny. Lockdown and COVID actually became quite this thing that almost became this incredible opportunity for family time and for reflection and for, nothing else was going on. So we could actually just chill out. I just think that the world is in a way dominated by negative influences and by things, by people, having this, very, very strong reaction to change. And the world does need to change. We need to adjust the way we kind of think about wealth, about health, about the climate. We have to. But that is so scary for a lot of people. And I think that what we're doing a lot of the time is turning to these mostly older men, these powerful figures who are kind of these very mainstream people who promise us that things are going to just be the same, instead of really kind of going with this idea of change. And I think we're in this moment of huge conflict all over the world at the moment, and we see it all over the news. I will make one more point about that, is that I think that what happens with social media is that it exacerbates everything. So, people will talk about the fact that maybe Joburg isn't as safe as it used to be, or South Africa, or the world, or generally. But I think what used to happen is that, if God forbid a kid got run over by a bicycle in Pretoria, it might make, page 4 of the Citizen in next week's newspaper. And somebody might read it and 2 people might hear about it. But now, if that happens, it goes over social media immediately, and all of us suddenly feel that our kids are in danger whenever they get onto a bicycle. So I think that this idea of this immediacy of social media also kind of exacerbates some of the negativity that's in the world. And I think it's so important for us to take a break from social media, as often as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I've absolutely. I think we live in a world right now where we're hyper connected, and every event is published, and everyone has a platform, and everyone has an opinion. And I sometimes wonder if Lisa likes to do this a lot from a stress management perspective. She disconnects, believe it or not, from social media. She doesn't want to read the news. She doesn't want to know the headlines.
I don't even scroll on Instagram for more than 5 seconds, or Facebook. I post once a year on Facebook, because I jump and run. So I create content that I think will add meaning to people's lives. It will educate, empower, uplift, etc. I dump and run because I'm so scared of that space. Like, I want to add my contribution positively, and do my thing to educate and do whatever I can. But then I'm to leave that space, because I am one of those people that's influenced by my environment. And what I read, what I see, and what I hear, it affects me. And I know that about myself now. I'm a sensitive human. And it's taken a long time for me to understand that about myself. So I dump, I run, and I'm a better off person.
Yeah. I think we're all more sensitive than we'd like to. I mean, I really do believe that. I think that we are actually, all of us, more sensitive than we allow the world to see us. And I think that we are all deeply affected a lot of the time by what we see and what we hear. And, I think that social media is really affecting us in a very profound way. And I'm hoping that the kids of today who are growing up, I hope that they see through it. And they realize that it's actually not adding value to their lives, that it was this incredibly, dopamine shooting thing that we all kind of got addicted to and got carried away with, but that ultimately it actually does not add value to our lives, other than being able to find an old friend that you went to school with. That's my own personal opinion.
Mr. Alan, before I let you go, last question for me is chronic stress. Just give us where does this go? Like, you get chronic stress. What can go wrong? Just from a medical perspective, your purview.
Prolonged stress.
Prolonged stress. Consistent prolonged stress that you're constantly dealing with. What are the symptoms, number one, of identifying them? And what's the warning? What can land up happening? What have you seen?
I think that we have to recognize this real link between our psyche and our soma, and that being in I mean, when you talk about, chronic or prolonged stress, I presume what you're talking about is chronic or prolonged mental anxiety, mental anguish, because I mean, we all live with chronic stress, but I think what you're talking about, Stafford, is you're talking about like stress that actually we find unmanageable, that goes on for too long a period of time. And I think that that will manifest, I think, primarily in our bodies. I think that it will affect everything from our posture to our organs to our muscle strength to everything ultimately. I think stress does eat away at us because of the way that it affects our serotonin levels, and it affects our, it affects us on a very profound physical level. And that's why I think that it's that you should, one of the ways of managing your stress is through exercising and building up your body as well, and being in touch with your body all the time and checking to see. I think it affects our sleep. It affects our diet. So what happens when we don't sleep well, I'm sure we'll hear from the nutritionist, is that it messes with our brain system called the ARAS system, which is our kind of primal brain. And when we don't sleep well, we can't regulate our appetite, we can't regulate our moods. So what happens is it starts the cycle of you don't sleep well, you don't eat well, you get more unhealthy, it adds to your stress levels, you don't sleep well, etc., etc. And it becomes so important for us to find a way to break that cycle.
Excellent. Alan, thanks so much for your time this evening.
Can I do one more thing? I promised Alon I would do it, which is to share a short video on Panda.
Yeah, sure.
And just if I can just talk about our Panda business model, because you mentioned your business model earlier, and that you don't want to kind of feel like you're always selling something, but Panda's free. So the way that we generate revenue is we go into companies and we work with the employees inside of that company, and what we help the employees to really manage their stress levels, understand how they're doing in terms of their mental health, and understand how their mental health is affecting them at work. And then what we do is we gather that information anonymously, and we enable the executive team of that company to intervene with not individuals, but with teams, in a way that that we can stop the crises happening before they happen. So if we pick up, let's say Nedbank is a client, and we pick up that woman at Nedbank between the ages of 25 and 35 are really struggling with work-life balance, we can actually go in there, we can pick it up, we can run all these campaigns, and we can help people to have much healthier relationships at work and with their work. And that's really how we make that's the Panda model. So I wanted to just talk about that, and then I really wanted to just share this very quick video about Panda, and then how people can download it. Is that okay?
Please go ahead.
So is it okay for me to share my screen?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Introducing Panda Health. We are the healthy food, exercise, and sleep for your team's mental health. We help to improve the emotional health and performance of your teams. The Panda app allows you to anonymously access cutting-edge tools, personalized support, and proactive solutions, all in the palm of your hand. Tailored content and features designed for you. Set your own pace and engage in a way that works. Access live, audio-only sessions 7 days a week. Sessions are hosted by peers for support or mental health experts to better understand daily challenges we all struggle with. Sessions run from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on weekdays and 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. on weekends. Panda helps you assess and track your mental health, helping you understand what issues you are facing and what treatment you should seek. Remember, we can't improve from over 30 personalized and AI-powered courses on a wide variety of topics to help you to optimize your performance and build the skills you need. Add up to 3 dependents to your Panda profile. They will have access to all of the features and support that they need to make their mental health a priority. Want to check out the Panda app and explore these benefits? Simply scan the QR code on screen and create an account.
Cool. So Thank you so much for letting me do that little video. And if anybody is interested in downloading Panda, like I say, for all the users, it's free. If you sign up, there is a code. Stefan, are you going to tell what the code is?
You know what I've done, Alan? I've actually put in the chat, I'll put a link.
Oh, fantastic.
And on that link is the landing page on our site. And there's a code that it mentions there that you get some text-based help sessions, I think up to a certain amount of time or X amount of sessions. So that's up on the website. Please click on the link, everyone. It's there. That's on our.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
So I really appreciate the time tonight. And this has just been, I really enjoy following you guys. And thanks a lot. Good luck to everyone.
Thanks for making the time. Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Okay. There's a couple of questions that have popped up here that I'm I'm gonna get Carly to address it from a dietetics perspective. But thanks again. Please keep listening in. Just if you mute, I'm gonna give the floor over to Carly. Carly, are you there? So for those of you that don't know, Carly's on our team. She's a registered dietitian. She is she's a usual on the guest list here, and yeah, I think most of the folks know you here, Carly, already. So welcome again, Carly.
Hey, Carly.
Hey, Steph. Hey, Lisa. Very happy and honored regular to be here, I promise. And yeah, I hope you're not getting bored of me, everyone. I hope I'm sharing new and exciting things each time and each webinar. But Alan, thank you.
Just to go further, there's that question in the chat. I'm going to pose it to you, and then as you flow, you can answer it. And I think it's something that I think because you do so many consultations, could probably answer better. Do you think SSRIs and anxiolytics are overprescribed and adding to the problem with mismanagement of unhealthy stress? So maybe just think about where you want to slot that in the present, but I think that's one that you really address.
Quite a big question. I'll get to it as I'm going through my presentation, Steph. But yeah, Alan, thank you so much for that really informative talk. I know a lot of my friends and colleagues who are other dietitians have done talks on the platform, and it's really, reaching so many people. It's wonderful. Okay, so being a dietitian, obviously I will be focusing on the food aspect of stress and general wellness and lifestyle aspect of stress and linking how the two are so connected. Okay, so when a patient comes to see me, I ask them these two questions. Firstly, how would you describe your current stress levels out of 10? And secondly, how do you cope with stress? Do you have any tools or techniques or coping strategies that help you decompress and that help take your mind off of day-to-day worries and stress? And I often get some funny looks and they think, but why are you asking me this? You're a dietitian. You should be focusing on my food. Why does this matter to you? And the reality is that it's so important for me to understand where a patient is at from a stress perspective, to really see how stress is so intertwined with health and nutrition, and stress impacts the decisions we make around food and eating, but also the other side of this coin is that the food that we're eating impacts our stress as well. So it really is this bidirectional relationship. And it's so interesting to see the answers to these questions and to hear the answers to these questions. And a lot of people don't know how to describe their current stress levels. And I saw it in the chat earlier as well. Somebody was asking, how do I even know if I'm stressed? So I'm sure Panda has lots of those amazing questionnaires or forms or surveys or assessments that can help give you some sort of answer there. But I think it's important to understand that there's so many different signs and symptoms to identify stress. There's physical symptoms, looking at muscle tension or gut health issues or chronic headaches. And then, of course, we have the emotional symptoms of crying spells or irritability or anxiety, mood changes. There's behavioral changes that can be linked back to stress. So changes in your appetite or changes in your exercise routine or your sociability or what you're doing from a hobbies perspective. And then, of course, there's also the cognitive symptoms linked to stress. So changes in your productivity, increased procrastination, maybe lack of focus and ability to concentrate during a lecture or during work or whatever it is. There really are so many symptoms. And I think it is important to have that awareness. So do some digging, do some research, and understand where you are at from a stress perspective. And then the second question, how do you cope with your stress? This is an interesting one. Most people, honestly, most patients that I see say, I don't, or I don't have any tools in my toolbox, or I just get on with it, or I just deal with it, or I just move through it. And when I say, but how do you move through it? Like, what do you do? I don't know. That's often the answer I get is, I don't know. Or sometimes people are really honest and they do often say what comes up a lot is food. And eating is a way that a lot of people comfort and a lot of people self-regulate and self-soothe. So I'm going to touch on stress eating further down in the presentation as well. And then wine is also a common one as well. Luckily, exercise does come up, thank goodness. I think because I work with Lisa in the bounty space, and luckily exercise does come up quite a lot as a stress management tool, but I just don't think there's enough menu items on the menu and options from a stress coping perspective. So I think broadening your individual toolbox, whatever works for you, is really, really important. Okay, so I have spoken about this before, but I think it's really important to go back to having that level of awareness of your stress response and the biology of our nervous system. And so many people don't understand the two sides of our nervous system, so sympathetic and then parasympathetic, and what happens in the two. So sympathetic is known as fight, flight, or sometimes freeze. And from a biological perspective here, what we tend to see, increased stress hormone production. So cortisol shoots up, adrenaline shoots up, your heart rate increases, blood pressure increases, blood sugar can sometimes also increase because your body starts to mobilize all of these stored fuels from your liver or from your muscles, starts to break down glycogen and get more blood sugar into the system to prepare you to run from a lion or whatever the case may be. Vasodilation, so your blood vessels dilate to allow for better blood flow to the muscles. Your pupils dilate, there's shallow rapid breathing, blood flows to the brain and the muscles, and then your reproductive system and your digestive system are sort of shut down and put on mute and put on pause. So I think it is also so important to highlight, and Alan did touch on it, but acute versus chronic stress. Our bodies are wonderfully designed to cope with acute stress. They are able to mount a stress response, get over the challenge, get over the hurdle, and then resume to baseline and get back to that baseline level. And that's helpful. That helps with growth, that helps with development. Those acute bouts of stress are really, really important. And without stress, we don't grow. Without stress, we're not challenged. But I think what the problem is at the moment, and where we're at in current society, is that people are ruminating on that acute stress, and they're not allowing their body to have the yin and the yang between the fight and the flight, and then the other side of the nervous system, which is the rest and digest. So they're constantly thinking about or whatever it is that's stressing them out. They're ruminating on whatever it is that's stressing them out. They're holding onto it, and without even realizing it, they're living too much of their lives in the fight or flight state. Even their sleep quality isn't as restful and restorative as it should be, which is when that rest and digest does kick in. So the other side of our nervous system, parasympathetic, the nice rest and digest, this birdie sleeping here and chilling out. Deep belly breathing, here's what happens. We really do have decreased production of all of those stress hormones. This is when our digestion is at its optimal, cellular repair and renewal happens. We've got that increased production of growth hormone and melatonin, so really important for good quality sleep. Growth hormone plays a big role in weight regulation as well. So it's just the other side of the seesaw, and it's the opposite. So rest and digest is really important to activate during the day, I suppose, and to make sure that you're balancing out the two sides of the nervous system scale. So really, really important to understand acute versus chronic stress. I suppose chronic stress really is when you've just been under the pump for too long, when you haven't had that break, when you haven't had that time away from whatever it is that's stressing you out, and you haven't had the ability to balance out the fight, flight, or freeze response. So when we look at the consequences of chronic stress, so not managing stress optimally, what I often see, this is my own experience from practice and what the research shows as well. So poor energy levels and fatigue. I heard a really, really nice expression on a podcast, which I'll share with you all at the end, but that stress is so expensive to our bodies. So in essence, stress robs us of our energy, of our motivation, of our drive. I think emotionally and physically, it really does take up a lot of energy to cope with day-to-day stress. So chronic stress leaves us feeling depleted, our batteries completely drained and totally exhausted. Another big one is digestive issues. So that could look like a runny tummy, loose stools, constipation, severe cramps, bloating, reflux, ulcers, gastritis. I had a patient, I actually saw him today. He went to his gastroenterologist and he had what the gastroenterologist described as 3rd-degree burns in his esophagus from too much stress and a variety of other factors, but that gastritis caused really, really severe inflammation within his gut. So tummy issues is something that I work a lot with, and stress is one of the real root causes and one of the underlying factors there. Changes in appetite and weight. This is an interesting one, and everybody is different, and I think most of us know what sort of side of the coin we're on. Some people don't eat when they're stressed, and they can't eat and they can't stomach food, and they could go hours or days without actually eating properly because the nausea, they can't actually stomach food. And then the other side is some people who can't stop eating when they're stressed, and the binge eating side comes in. So that's really interesting. Visceral fat is something that can increase with that chronic stress and chronic production of cortisol. And that visceral fat is that dangerous fat that sits inside our abdominal cavity, wrapping around all of our vital organs, increasing the risk of diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, etc. Poor sleep, and as Alan mentioned, there's that negative cycle that happens with poor sleep, is that the less sleep we get, the more stressed we are, the more irritable we are, the poorer our diets are, the less we're exercising, and so the cycle continues. But we did do that whole webinar on sleep last month, so please, if you haven't watched that, go and rewatch it, where we give all of our tips and tricks to improve your sleep quality. And then anxiety and depression can come from long periods of chronic stress. Skin is another sign. So skin rashes, breakouts, accelerated skin aging, hair loss, hair thinning is another common one that I see. Increased chronic systemic inflammation. So that would impact every single cell, tissue, and organ in your body, impacting your immune system as well. Chronic headaches, nutrient deficiencies are a big one. So especially magnesium, your B vitamins, vitamin D, zinc, those are all nutrients that are rapidly used up by your body when it's trying to cope and trying to deal with this chronic stress. So I do a lot of blood tests, and I often see that these are deficient. Chronic pain, frequent sickness, poor immunity, stress hugely impacts our hormonal balance. So the thyroid can become dysfunctional under chronic stress. We see something like Hashimoto's coming up under long periods of chronic stress, or chronic stress being a contributor there, or adrenal dysfunction being a contributor to thyroid dysfunction, sex hormone changes as well. And then what's interesting is that our telomere length can be shortened by chronic stress as well. And our telomeres are the little ends of our chromosomes. So they're DNA strands on the ends of our chromosomes. And we know that the shorter our telomeres are, the more we are likely to age, or the quicker aging is likely to be. So stress and health really are intertwined. And here I really am focusing on that chronic unmanaged stress, not the acute bouts of stress that are actually pretty good for us. What I wanted to touch on as well, and Alan mentioned it, is burnout. So what we're looking at with burnout here from a physical health perspective and a nutrition perspective, we're looking at something called the HPA axis. And the HPA axis is known as the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So essentially it's connecting your brain to your adrenal glands, and your adrenal glands are these two little triangular shaped glands here you can see on this picture that sit on top of your kidney kidneys, and your adrenal glands are responsible for producing cortisol. So we all know cortisol is our stress hormone, and this stress response, or the HPA axis, can become dysfunctional. So it is essentially it's the system that helps us to cope with stress, and it helps us to manage stress. So it's wonderful if it's regulated and if it's in balance. But with chronic stress, whether that be chronic stress from thoughts or feelings, perceptions, poor diet, infection, sickness, illness can also contribute to this chronic stress. That can lead to that prolonged production of cortisol. And what's interesting is that cortisol is actually neurotoxic. So your brain does not like a lot of cortisol. And what ends up happening is your brain then communicates to those little triangular adrenal glands and says, shush, shut up. I can't cope anymore. I can't deal with all of this cortisol. You need to quieten down. So we go from extremely high levels of cortisol down the slide to low levels of cortisol. And that is essentially burnout, where we see symptoms of not being able to get up in the morning, not being able to have the energy to cope at work, napping all the time, really, really, really tired. So I've got some symptoms here of this HPA stress response dysfunction. So what we're looking at here, being tired but wired, so really feeling exhausted, but your brain is just ticking and not being able to fall asleep properly, weight loss resistance, poor immune function. Another big one is intense cravings for sugary, salty foods and caffeine. So needing those stimulants to pick you up and to keep you going, because your body's ability to actually give you some sort of cortisol response isn't great. Stubborn fat accumulation around the middle is something we see. Poor alcohol tolerance, tired in the morning even after really good sleep. And then the hormonal and thyroid dysfunctions that can come in, increased anxiety, blood pressure and blood sugar irregularities too. So I think it is really important to see a dietitian or an integrative GP for blood tests, further assessments. There are tests that we can do to assess this HPA axis. We can measure cortisol in various ways. We can measure lots of other hormones that can give us this response. But what's amazing is that diet is one of the puzzle pieces that can really help to improve this dysfunction and improve the stress response dysfunction. It's definitely not the only solve at all. Therapy and the mental health side and the lifestyle side and the exercise side are all just as important, but because diet is my game, that's what I'm going to be speaking about. So supplements and nutritional practices that can help us to buffer this stress response and to balance out this HPA axis dysfunction can be really important. I think just a word of caution with supplements, there are so many stress response or stress solution supplements out there, and I do think we need to be really careful with what we're taking. Adaptogens have become incredibly popular. So adaptogens are essentially supplements that help buffer our body's response to stress and to this dysfunction. I do really, really encourage you, if you can, to be under the guidance of a healthcare practitioner when you are trying any adaptogens, to get advice around evidence-based adaptogens. Some of the nutrients I like to use to support this stress response, magnesium, ashwagandha, have really nice research behind them. Omega-3s, there's reishi mushroom, there's rhodiola, lion's mane mushroom, valerian root, probiotics. So there really are some nice, safe supplement options to look at. However, supplements are the cherry on top. Okay, so we've really got to get the foundational eating and lifestyle practices right first before just thinking that a supplement is going to solve all. Okay, then I wanted to touch on the DNA testing that we have available and the two tests that are applicable to tonight. We've got DNA Resilience and we've got DNA Mind. They are two incredibly insightful and empowering tests that really can give you insight into the way that your brain and your body might be wired, and what you can do from a holistic perspective, diet, lifestyle, supplementation, and exercise to help your particular genetic weaknesses or genetic areas of concern. So resilience is really detailed, amazing report, and I've seen a lot of patients recently who have gotten lots and lots of benefit from them. Just a disclaimer here though, I always think if you're really, really struggling, don't start with DNA. Go and see a psychologist, a psychiatrist, see a doctor first. That is your first port of call. If you're generally curious and you are stable and you're just wanting some extra knowledge and information, these reports can be really, really helpful. They're not diagnostic, so they can't diagnose anxiety, depression, or any sort of mental health conditions, but they look into particular genes that might offer insight into risk and predisposition, and then more importantly, what we can do about that risk. So DNA, Mind, and Resilience are really helpful. And then I've got some guidelines here, some summary guidelines. Of course, you don't have to do all of them all at once, but any that feel doable for you at the moment are going to be really helpful, just in terms of preventing burnout or managing burnout, depending on where you might be. I think the first one here, prioritizing health and nutrition during stressful periods. This is obviously easier said than done, but it really does go a long way. If you make your health and your nutrition and your exercise non-negotiables, they're going to help get you through those stressful months, stressful weeks, stressful periods, focusing on mindful eating, which we'll touch on shortly as well. Seeing rest as a productive use of your time. I think in this go lifestyle that we are in, people feel guilty to rest. They feel guilty to take time out. Really, really important to see it as a productive use of your time and allowing your body to tap into that rest and digest state. Reducing caffeine, sugar, and salt intake. Okay, I saw somebody today who was on 10 cups of black coffee, 10 a day. It's a lot. You are just wiring your body with that amount of caffeine, and you're putting so much stress and pressure on those adrenal glands, and you furthering the production of cortisol and adrenaline and all of the frantic catecholamines and stress hormones. Being careful of processed foods as well. So we have to understand that food can induce a physiological stress response in the system. So really being mindful that processed, highly refined foods can be stressful on your digestive system, which can really impact overall stress. Try not to skip meals, letting yourself get too hungry or overly hungry in times of stress really isn't a good thing. Making sure that you're hydrating adequately, drinking enough water or herbal teas. Herbal teas can be really amazing. Chamomile, ginger, lemon balm really can be quite soothing and calming. There's lavender teas, there's amazing sleep teas that can be really, really helpful. Trying to balance your meals from a macronutrient perspective. So making sure you're getting some sort of veggies or color on your plate, a protein source, some healthy fats like olive oil, nuts and seeds, and then really importantly, some fiber-rich whole grain carbs that are going to be slowly released into your bloodstream and keep you satiated and full for a while. So balancing meals is important. I think when there are these ups and downs in blood sugar throughout the day, that's also going to exacerbate feelings of irritability or moodiness or whatever it might be. You're going to feel worse if your blood sugar is up and down. Prioritizing the veg, salad, and fruit at all meals. So a nice guideline that I have here is to make sure that there's some sort of colorful element on your plate at every meal. This is where you're going to be getting majority of those micronutrients from. So all of your antioxidants and your vitamins and your minerals. And then being strict with sleep schedules and hygiene. I'm not going to go into that too much because we have the sleep webinar on the eStore. Alcohol's a biggie. I think Alan can probably touch on that too. Alcohol really doesn't help us in times of stress, even though in the moment it might feel like it calms you down. It really does, again, increase that physiological stress response. Steph, why are you smiling? Did you have a glass of bubbly tonight or something?
Yes, it does. When you said alcohol doesn't help, and he's like, yes, it does.
It feels like it does, but really, I think it's an easy habit to slip into, to have a glass of wine every night, and then that glass of wine becomes 2, and then 3, and then it really is going to impact your sleep quality. It's going to impact a lot of other areas of health. So just being really careful with alcohol in times of stress. move. I know Lisa's going to chat more about exercise, deep breathing, meditation, yoga, mindfulness. Deep breathing is one of the quickest and most effective ways to shift that nervous system state from the fight or flight into rest and digest. And I find a nice way to get into the habit of deep breathing is to do it before meals, so that you're activating rest and digest, so that your body is able to process all the beautiful food that you're eating. It's able to absorb all of the nutrients from your meal. So important. Massage, reflexology, time in nature. These are just some of the guidelines and tips that I often give to clients, but find what works for you is really, really important. And then stress eating is something that I see a lot and I help patients with, but I think if I have to think about my clients, more of them go towards the stress eating and the binge eating side and the overeating side than the not eating when they're stressed. So some tips that might help here is mindful awareness, really trying to listen to your body's hunger and fullness cues. That's something I work with patients a lot on, and that intuition around listening to your body. Emotional recognition. So I listened to this one tip on a podcast, which I think is really clever, is to make a little sticky note and put it on your fridge or put it on your pantry. And the first thing, say, what am I feeling? And then the second sentence, say, what do I need? Because so often we are feeling tired, but then we go and eat a chocolate, or we're feeling stressed, but then we go and eat 5 biscuits. But actually, when you're feeling tired, you need a 5-minute timeout. When you're feeling stressed, you need to go outside, call a friend, find something else to do. So this leads into the next point, which is non-food coping strategies. So create a menu, not of food, but a menu of non-food related things that make you feel good, whatever it is for you, so that you have that list at the forefront when times of stress arise, so that you don't always just divert to food. Again, the balanced meals, blood sugar stability, regular meals and snacks. Don't let yourself get hangry. And food journaling can be really helpful. I have a beautiful template that I use with certain patients that helps to encourage that mindfulness around food and connecting food and emotions. Allowing yourself to have a positive food environment. So when you know that you're going to have a super stressful, busy week at work or month at work, make sure you've got healthy foods accessible in the fridge and in the pantry, and try to not maybe buy certain trigger foods that you know are going to tempt you. Mindful eating, so trying to always be sitting at a table when you're eating your meals, eating slowly, enjoying it with others if you can, chewing your food properly, enjoying every bite. Social support can be really helpful, chatting to friends or communities, and then professional help. So psychologist and dietitian can help hugely if you're really battling with stress eating and you can't get on top of it. This was the podcast I chatted about earlier, briefly. So the Huberman Lab, Andrew Huberman, he's an amazing scientist from America, and Professor Lisa Raleigh is in this episode, and they talk all about controlling stress for healthy eating, metabolism, and aging. It's a long one, but have a look. It's episode 118 if any of you listen to that, but it's a really, really great podcast to listen to. Okay, so to quickly chat on that question, I haven't forgotten, Steph. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not somebody who deals with SSRIs or anti-anxiety medications. I can't prescribe them. I can't manage them. I can't taper people off. What I've heard from my patients, though, is that a lot of them feel like they're given a pill without the other piece of the puzzle, without the other leg. They're not necessarily referred to a dietitian or a psychologist or told to go and exercise. So I do sometimes think that these medications are being prescribed a lot, overprescribed. I think that could be up for debate. That's on an individual basis. But I'm seeing lots of kids, lots of teens on these medications, and maybe when other interventions were implemented sooner. I can't comment on everyone's individual severity of cases, but I do think that more emphasis needs to be put on the other side, the lifestyle side, as opposed to just the medication side. I did have a patient the other day, which was really interesting. He went to his GP and he's in his auditing years, so really, really stressful. And he said, please just give me an anti-anxiety and Concerta to cope. Give me this and give me that. That's what I need. And the doctor said, absolutely not. You can go and do cold water showers every single day, and you can go and do deep breathing. Sure enough, we redid his blood test. His cortisol has come down beautifully. He's coping so much better. So it really is up to a doctor who has knowledge on the other side of the coin to help with that, if that answers the question.
Always excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. So much information. Short space of time.
Yeah,
so much.
I'm not gonna praise you any more than I usually do. So
now listen,
it's another
I
great
need to
job.
ask you, because we never ask you anything.
What?
You just like facilitating, MC, and all of that. You got the easy job. So how does Mr. Stafford Macy, who does a lot of things, how do you cope with stress? What are your coping mechanisms?
So I have, this is a personal view,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not something that I prescribe to anyone else. I think there's two aspects to me. I think one is the way I grew up. So I grew up in a very different way. Lots of stress where I grew up. We weren't the richest people on the block. There was lots of challenges associated with how the country was constructed at that time, and we know what that was all about. But there is always in the back of my mind that no matter how hard this gets, the contrast to my past just doesn't allow me to tipple over. So, i.e., raising capital in a business, funding a startup, going through the machinations of making a business survive. Those things, considering the stress that I had growing up as a child, pale in comparison. You know, I know what it feels like to go hungry. I know what it feels like to see parents. I mean, I've really gone through that. So for me, when I take a look at my background, there's nothing that lays ahead in my life that compares to where I come from. Now, because of that's extreme, though, and that's very personal. So whenever I find myself in any stressful situation, I always flick into that contrast mode of this is nothing compared to where I come from.
Mm-hmm.
And just by the way, Lisa never prompted that she was going to do this.
No.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the other side to it is I embrace stress. I love stress. I see other people crushed by it. I see other people kind of get down on their knees with it. I don't. I embrace it. I feel the feeling in my body when I go into stress mode is my body gifting me the necessary sensory adaptations for the moment to do what I need to do. Now, when I get up on a stage and I speak in front of 2,000 people, which I do often, I mean, some people get crushed by that stress. I find that feeling and that stress in that moment, it fuels me.
Mm-hmm.
When your business and what we're doing in your business is stressful times, a lot of the times, you know, I can see your stress response versus my stress response. And I think that's where we are perhaps complementary, because I keep put it into perspective. I'm like, no, I have an out-of-body experience with that. I don't allow it to penetrate too deeply. But, you know, that comes after 49 years of being on the planet and having to deal with different circumstances, right? So yeah, but look, do I get stressed? Yes. Does it keep me up at night? It depends on what it is. Look, I think people there's certain stresses that are toxic stresses, right? Financial stresses that's probably like the worst form of stress that I think a human body can endure. There's marital stress, relationships that don't work. You know, so I'm lucky in certain circumstances that in my life where I am right now, like those are not necessarily the stresses that I'm dealing with. But I think there's abuse. There's relationships that are difficult. There are situations where you've got to make choices, and these choices are big choices. And in that moments, those are very, very stressful. I think children bring along a lot of stress, the stress of raising them, educating them, and dealing with their difficult circumstances. So I also think what was said earlier, I think social media and all these things keep hammering us. And luckily I read a lot. I read tons. I read
I don't know how you read so much.
But I read 4 to 6 hours a day.
And then still stay positive.
No, but the thing is, it's the reading gives you. No, but the reading gives you the context, perspective. So when you have the historical context, then you can make sense of the present. So I think that's also what helps a lot. So look, that's just my personal thing. Do I get stressed? Yes, but
the limiter is always comparing it to what you've been through in the past. Yeah. I mean, not everybody has your past though. So for them, this moment that they're in right now feels like the most stressful moment they've ever been through.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where it's hard. I think it does depend on everybody's journey. But I do get a lot of clients over the years that come, you know, to see me for consults or training or whatever, and they say, oh, I'm so stressed. I've got this and I've got that and I've got this and I've got that. And I say to them, are you stressed or are you just busy? Because I think that there's a big difference between being stressed and being busy. And I don't think a lot of people realize the difference, you know. So I made up like a little acronym because I realized I don't have.
By the way, did I answer your question?
Yes, I mean.
Can I go out of frame?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to hear your perspective, but I do think your perspective is extreme. Like with everything that you do in your life, it's like extreme. It's all or nothing. I call it the SMI, the Stafford Macy Index. It's like times by 10 divided by 2, and that's like where Staff lies, because it's like he is extreme because of where you've come from. But not everybody is you know, and I think that's important. Anyway, I made a little acronym because I need to keep it short, apparently, 10 minutes. For the most important things that help me, and I try and impart this knowledge whenever I come across clients. I could go into a lot more, you know, different letters to make a much longer acronym, but if I had to consolidate things today, what helps me, what keeps me on my toes, able to do a lot of things in a day, reduces my stress levels, because things get very, very busy, very, very busy. One thing is I wouldn't say very often that I'm stressed, because for me, stress means distressed, not busy. I feel like I know the difference by now. Stress is, you know, major financial woes, crazy relationship issues, like you were mentioning, abuse and things like really crazy stuff that sometimes you don't always have under your control. And you do need to seek help to get through very, very hard times. For me, it's just a lot to get through. There's a lot to get done. I know the difference between being stressed and being busy. And for me, it's about perspective. I always look at the situation that I'm in and know it's just a time that I'm going through. So firstly, in order to have any kind of positive outlook at all and even be motivated the next day, I am going to mention it because, you know, I always talk about it, is sleep. If I do not get a good night's sleep, then one night is okay, but 2-3 nights in a row, and I'm throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And I think this is a physiological thing. It's not something that Lisa, you know, feels. We all know that when we don't get adequate sleep, restful sleep, good quality sleep, and we look after our sleep hygiene, it's very hard to stay on top of your game. It's hard to think positive. It's hard to be in a good mood. It's hard to eat the right things. It's hard to even care about exercising. I mentioned this even more in the podcast in detail. But for me, it all starts with getting a good night's rest. So even now, we're going to finish this webinar a little bit late, but I still need to try and get in my minimum 7 hours. I'm going to look at my schedule tomorrow and I'm going to see what can I move so that I can still get adequate sleep. Yeah, so I will look at it with so much importance that I will reshuffle my next day as much as I possibly can in order to prioritize that, because that is where it all starts. So sleep is number one. So S is for sleep, okay? Then movements. Yes, we all knew that was coming. And I talk a lot about the difference between exercise and movement. And there is a big difference between the two. Movement is any type of movement where we are moving, getting up from our chairs, walking down the stairs, you know, walking to the store, going for a walk with the dogs, playing with the kids, doing some yoga at our desks, whatever, moving through the day. Exercise, remember, is your intentional, let me get my heart rate up. I need to sweat. I need to get those happy hormones secreted. I need to get my heart rate to a certain level for an extended period of time to tax my heart muscle, to make it stronger and more forceful with each pump so that I can lower my resting heart rate, lower my blood pressure, reduce my risk of cardiovascular disease and all of that. So we know the hormonal benefits is also the happy hormones that are secreted, whether we like it or not. There goes that serotonin and those, you know, those happy hormones. And without a doubt, no matter what you went into an exercise session feeling, you will always feel better at the end. You'll have a different perspective. You'll feel like you've got this, I can do this. We've all been there. So for me, that feeling is really, really addictive.
So it's not walking, right?
No, walking is not, is movement. Walking is movement. Unless you've got ankle weights on your ankles and you're walking up hills with wrist weights on and you're walking fast and your heart rate is hitting 80% of your maximum for 30 minutes, walking is definitely not adequate for exercise. End of story. Okay. And also age dependent to get your max heart rate. Remember, 220 less your age gives you your maximum, and you want to be working at 80% of that.
So that's my maximum.
To classify as exercise.
60 beats per
Okay.
minute.
And that is like to get your points, right? So no longer steps. Your steps, you get 100 points a day with most of the the big companies. And then with getting your heart rate up over a 30-minute period, you get 300 points. So they have even weighted it, saying exercise is different to movement, guys. 10,000 steps is not enough. Okay. Better than nothing, but it's not enough. Okay. So I love exercise. The rebounding is my form of exercise because it is playful, it's fun, it's low impact, and we all know why I love rebounding. I talk about it every day on my social pages. But for me, it is a form of mindfulness. I struggle. I'm still learning the power to meditate. I will get there. But for me, my me time and my 100% mindfulness when nothing else can creep in at all, because it is quite complex, balancing, keeping to the beat, using an accessory, engaging my core, all of those things all need to happen at the same time, mean I cannot let my mind wander about my to-do list, my woes, my worries, my busy day, nothing. It is literally all I can do. So for that 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour on my rebounder, it is my mindfulness time. Okay. And the fact that I am slightly competitive with myself, when I do achieve that routine, or I get through a really hard workout and I'm sweating and my heart rate's high and I got to my goal, it is a form of like self-love and self-appreciation, because I feel proud. I'm proud of myself for showing up. I'm proud that I got to the end. I'm proud I got the routine right. Proud I did it. I feel like it's a form of self-care and self-love. And at that time, I feel proud that I made the choice. I did it, made it to the end, and I did it well. Okay. So movement for me is a big game changer. Whenever I feel a little bit tense or, okay, there's too much going on, then I feel like exercise really does take the edge off, and it really changes my perception. From the time I go in to the time I finish, I definitely I have a different attitude. Okay. Different perspective. Then that's the M, SM. The O is for organized. Now, guys, I have lists and lists and lists, and my diary is planned to the T. And if I wake up late, or if I start my day without intention for what I need to get out of today, it really throws me. It really gives me a bit of anxiety. I need to know what I'm doing tomorrow, where I need to be, what Bella needs, the times, where am I going to fit in exercise, where am I going to fit in all the things I need to do, what are my priorities for the day, starting with those things first in the day so that the most important things are done. I have a real plan for the next day. If you tell me to start my day and I don't have a plan, oh my gosh, that I feel like I'm chasing my tail the whole time. So I do feel that we need to spend a little bit more time preparing for the day ahead and knowing this is what I want to get out of the day. There's an intention. I'm going to spend some energy and effort on planning. Also my diet. I mean, I look at what I'm going to eat. I make sure that it's in the fridge, pack a little snack pack, and have, some self-pride. I want to fuel my body with the right stuff. I want to be able to eat the snacks knowing that I'm going to be out and about and not be able to pop into a garage or a restaurant every 5 seconds to get a snack. So I'm prepared. I prepare everything. And that takes practice. It didn't come quickly, but it definitely helps me to know that even my outfit's out the night before, guys, my training outfits and my outfit that I'm going to wear with my matching earrings, my matching handbag. I look at the entire day. Okay, I'm shooting. I've got to, charge the microphones. I've got everything. And I tick it off. And there's nothing nicer, boy. And then ticking everything off or crossing everything out. And just organization definitely helps to reduce the anxiety, 100%. And then that's the O for organized. D stands for disconnecting. So we've spoken about it quite a few times on tonight's webinar. Disconnecting from whatever is causing you to be too busy. So I don't want to say stress, because it might be just, it's not stress, it's just busy. It's taking your attention away from being present in the now. And we all know how that can feel when we're torn between our kids trying to talk to us and we're on our phones, or we whatever. It feels like I'm doing this, but I'm also doing this, but I'm doing this, but I'm also doing this. I don't feel like I'm being fully present in anything I'm doing. And that can cause a lot of tension in the body. And I'm just going to say, temporary stress. So whatever you need to do to disconnect, whether you have an alarm that you set that at 6 p.m., my phone is going on silent, or I have a second phone with a different number that I switch to after 6 p.m. Some way of putting a line in the sand where you say this far and no further. this is my line and I need to turn off. So having other things that you fill with, so you're disconnecting from the things that are causing you to be busy and not present, and then filling them with fun things, whether it's a hobby, whether it's cooking, whether it's games with your kids or reading to your kids, whether it's music in the house. Maybe it is some self-love with meditation or anything like that, that gives you some joy. And then on the weekends, when you've got a little bit more time, maybe it is that you go to a rebounding workshop, or you connect with friends, or you have some kind of social support, something where it's a community where you're uplifting others, and that also gives you a lot of joy, where you're working for and uplifting some kind of community, whether it's self stuff, hair or massage or anything. Maybe you're going for a hike and you spend some time in nature. So disconnecting means different things for different people. Different people enjoy different types of hobbies. So for me, it's important to disconnect. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't have to repeat it too much, but if you know that social media affects you negatively, you need to put a stop to that. And if you do want to do the posting, just make sure you post and run, dump and run, as I call it. I really spend very little time on social media. You wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't say so, but I really do. I'm not more than 10 minutes a day. And then that's your D, hey? So SMOD. And then the last one is attitude. For me, this is everything. And I go into it quite deeply into our last podcast, which is all about joy. Learning to focus on the lesson. I mean, even today, I had quite a rough day today. I was out most of the day. Haven't showered yet since I trained. I did a shot of program earlier today. Still haven't showered. I ate from the back of an Uber car many times, snacking with my little snack pack. I was a bit late for a few things today, which caused me a little bit of anxiety. But I took everything that happened today. And the minute I got home, and Amber actually asked me, "How was your day?" And I was like, "Whew, it was a day." But I made sure I quickly rattled off like 4 or 5 things that were actually pretty amazing that happened in my day, to quickly change the narrative as I walk into the house and I know that my energy matters and my family matters and what I've just been through the day. It's okay, like I need to just change gear and try and put that behind me, and also just speak about the positives, not just all the negative stuff that happened. It's exhausting for people to hear, and it's not positive. It doesn't add value to your home, your energy, your environment. It's horrible. So wherever you can, focus on the lesson and the positive. I think is really important, because there is all that in a beautiful day. There's growth, there's challenges, there's obstacles. You overcame them, you got through it, you made it to the end of the day. And in all of that chaos, there was definitely some good stuff that came out of it. And as long as you can try and see those gems throughout the course of the day, that also helps. And that is that attitude of gratitude, the attitude of positivity, which also takes practice, lots and lots of practice. Something that, I know Steph and I are very different with this, but I don't sweat any of the small stuff, guys. Little things do not matter to me at all, because I look at the big picture. Whenever something happens, say somebody left something out and they should have put it away, or Bella's stuff is out, or the front door is open and it's the middle of winter. Who opened the door? I do not care about any of it, because there's so much bigger stuff going on that I really need to focus on. So I really try and say to myself, it doesn't matter. All day long, I'm saying that to myself. Who cares? This one cares, but I don't. So, and that has come with being a mom, by the way. That wasn't always how I was, but Bella rewired me to not sweat the small stuff, because kids see a lot more joy than we do. They're a lot more lighthearted and fun than we are. And we are the ones going around going, no. It's like, when did we become so bitter and so old? And I try and take the lessons as much as I can from her to just have a little bit more joy and fun in my day. So I think probably the last thing for me is accepting sometimes that things are not going to be as planned, as perfect. Some patches in your life will be a little bit unbalanced. If you are working towards a goal, you're doing your thesis, you're busy upskilling with a course, you're starting your own business, you are moving house, and to be a little bit more forgiving that not everything is going to be as perfect as you'd like it to be, I think is also really great at reducing one's stress levels. You know what, guys? For this whole week, Mom's not cooking. We are getting takeout, and try and have a healthy takeout. Sushi, Thai, you can find healthier alternatives. But so I'm just saying, like, sometimes we put ourselves under unnecessary pressure. And if you're going into a busy working weekend or whatever it is, just try and just be a little bit more forgiving and accepting of that time, saying, it's not going to be easy. It's going to be long. I am going to be a bit tired, but let's find the moments of joy and peace. Let's try and make life easier by getting takeout or whatever it is, delegating, outsourcing certain things that normally you would do yourself. Outsource it for a while. Get your food delivered to you instead of going to the shops and spending 3 hours in traffic. Try and make your life lighter and easier, because it can be quite daunting sometimes, all the things that we face in a week and a month and a year. And there are going to be times where you just got to say, so what? Stop sweating the small stuff. And the pressure that you're putting yourself under is often, you putting yourself under that pressure. It's self-inflicted. It's not anyone else putting you under those kinds of pressures. We do it to ourselves. So at the end, that's A for attitude. So the acronym is SMODA. I like it because it sounds a bit like your friend Yoda. SMODA. Okay, so we start with sleep. Movement is next. Get a little bit more organized. Okay, we need to disconnect, and we need a bit of an attitude adjustment. And all of these things take a little bit of time. So yes, that was my very condensed speech that was a few pages long earlier, and it became an acronym.
Brilliant. Okay, let's end on that. Alan, thank you so much for your time. Carly, amazing as usual.
Thank you, guys.
And Lisa Raleigh, thank you for your insights. Hopefully that was informative. Thank you to Biogen and all the folks over there for making this possible tonight. Thank you for spending all the way through 80-something of you stayed on until 9:39. We really appreciate it. Yeah.
See how quick time flies when you're having fun. 1 hour 40. You see, I can do a podcast for 2 hours, easy peasy. It's easy to get to that number.
All of you are going to get a recording, a link to download this, share it with friends. Thank you to the Panda team. Just go to get that app, download it, and
thank you, everyone.
Have a good
evening.
Go to bed.
Go sleep.
All of you. Go to bed.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.